Hey guys, thanks for joining and trying science. Today we're going to be talking about genetics and a scavenger hunt about you. So pull up a chair, grab your packet, grab something to write with, and let's get started. Our first intro question today is, hey, what do you need to know to predict the offspring, the puppies that could be made from these two dogs? What do you think you would need to know? Think about what you know about genetics. Well, I think what you're going to need to know is the genes of the dogs, because genes are what get passed on. Okay, and genes eventually cause traits. So we need to know about words like dominant and recessive when we start talking about genetics. So today we're going to cover some of that, and then we're going to look at a scavenger hunt where you get to look at your own genetic traits and sort of predict, not sort of, but predict what kind of traits you actually have, and then what kind of genes could be behind those traits. So let's take a look at some notes that I've got for you. Let's start with dominant and recessive. We're in our packet, page 4.5. It's the back of page 4. I'll pause, let you fill that in. Better yet, you pause. Dominant genes and recessive genes. So something important to remember is that you get two sets of genes from your parents. Okay, one from your father, one from your mother. So each gene really has two versions of that gene. You could be looking at a gene, let's just say, for like the color of your hair, whether it's got a dark or blonde color. Okay, so you're getting a gene from your dad and a gene from your mom that both could be used for you to make your hair color. So which gene are you going to read, your dad's or your mom's? Well, it depends what gene is dominant. A dominant gene means that it will take over. It will do the work. It will be the one that you read. So dominant genes take over, or they supersede, they take the place of, they, dominate the recessive genes. Recessive genes will not be expressed if there's a dominant gene. But let's say there's no dominant gene. Okay, well, in the case of, let's say, blonde hair, for example, both the genes are going to be recessive in that case. This word genotype, think of it like the type of gene. The type of gene you have is your genotype. It's the genes in your cells. So all of your genes are in each cell. Like every cell of your body that has a nucleus has a whole complete copy of all of your genes. So that's tons and tons of DNA, which is a long stringy molecule, which is coding for your traits by genes of A, T, C, and G, if you remember the lesson we did last time. So thousands of those make a gene, and many genes can make a trait. You can't see your genes because they're in your nucleus of your cells. You can do a genetic test and do things where we open up the nucleus, pull out the DNA, and then it's possible. So we're going to express the genotype as a pair of letters. Remember, two, one from mom, one from dad. Capitals are always the dominant, and lowercase are the recessive. So capitals are dominant, lowercase recessive. For an example, use the letter G here to represent the gene, right? Two capital genes means you have a dominant from mom and a dominant from dad. So that's your genotype. Capital G, capital G. The other side of the coin, you could be completely recessive. Two recessive genes from each parent. Or maybe you have one hybrid type with a dominant and a recessive together. Those are your genotypes. So there's always three. Now, it could be little g, big G, but that's really the same. And we just always write big G first. So we just do it the same way. Okay, let's look at the word phenotype. Pheno, think physical, PH, the physical outward appearance that you have, that you can see. Phenotypes are written as descriptions. So let's pick a trait like dimples. When you smile, some people have dimples, which are like little dents in your cheeks. I'm trying to do it. I don't know. I can't see. This camera's not that great. So you might have dimples. If you do, you got that as a trait, and that's the phenotype, dimples or not. Okay, let's quickly review that.
Genotypes versus phenotypes. So when you have a trait that is a pair of alleles, such as big B, or little b, we can refer to them in two different ways. The first is the genotype, which refers to the exact pairing of the alleles. For example, if we're dealing with eye color and there are two alleles, a big B for blue eyes and a little b for green eyes, then there are three possible genotypes: big B, big B, big B, little b, or little b, little b. Right, so these are the genotypes. These are the possible pairing of the alleles. The genotype isn't concerned with the expression of the trait, only the pairing of the alleles. Okay. The other way to refer to a trait is by the phenotype, which is its expression. So using our previous example of eye color, there are only two phenotypes: blue eyes or green eyes. Right? The phenotype isn't concerned with the pairing of the alleles. Right? The genotypes big B and big B little b both give the same phenotype, blue eyes. Okay, so the phenotype is just the expression. All right, so to recap, the genotype refers to the pair of alleles for a trait, in this case, the specific letters, and the phenotype refers to the expression of that trait, right? How it looks or how it functions.
Okay, so here's this whole video laid out here for you. So if you're not sure about the difference between these words, pause here and see if you can understand the difference in those terms. Awesome. Okay. Okay, now the other thing we're going to talk about in this activity is pure and hybrid, or homozygous pure. Both genes are of the same type, just basically meaning they're both either dominant, like two capitals, or both recessive, two lowercases. And either way, they're the same, so our prefix homo means same, so these are the same. In a hybrid or heterozygous, hetero means different, each gene is a different type, so there's our capital and our lowercase, our dominant and our recessive are together. So let's take a look. Can you figure out which is the dominant color in this flower? Take a minute, pause. Okay. Did you guess white? White is correct. When you have a capital, that's the dominant gene, whereas the lowercase is recessive. Anytime I see a capital letter here, I'm getting the trait. That's because it's dominant. So in this case here, they're both dominant, so it's going to definitely be white. In this one, there's two choices. One is dominant. When two genes go walking, the dominant gene does the talking. So we're going to have white coloring even though there's this recessive gene here. Dominant genes basically take over and do the trait. Here we have two recessive, so it's going to be not white. In this case, it's red. Well, why, you might ask, isn't it pink? I mean, white and red blended together make pink. And yeah, that does actually happen, and that's true. But the traits that we're talking about today in our lab are going to be just caused by one gene. In the real world, things like the color or how tall somebody is or how many, I don't know, fingers you have is probably caused by more than one gene. So in that case, there can be some blending effects. But if we're going to use examples that are just purely one gene, one trait, which are kind of rare actually. Most of your traits are caused by lots of genes combined. But in this case, since it's just you have the gene, you have the trait, it has the gene, it has the trait. Okay, so there's no blending happening. You'll see when we look at some of these traits here that you might have. All of these are caused by a single form of a gene. Like if you have the dominant gene, you have it. So the Superman chin, the widow's peak, which is kind of a little bit of a point here at your hairline, dimples, there they are. The color of your hair, brown and black is dominant over blonde. Freckles are dominant over not freckles. Dark eyes, or any color, is dominant over blue. And free hanging earlobes are dominant to attached earlobes. So what we're going to do is go to page 5, and you can see there's a list of traits on your genetics packet on page 5, like dimples and freckles and attached earlobes and widow's peak, and there's pictures in there so you can kind of follow along. Here's what you will do. Looking at yourself, maybe you need a mirror, smile and see if you have dimples. Now remember, phenotype is the physical trait, so I'm going to either write dimples or I might write no dimples if I don't have that. So those are my two choices. My genotype, well, since dimples is dominant, and I can tell that because the capital D is up here, so the thing that's dominant in this case is the first one listed. So I know for sure that I have at least one of those, or maybe both. But without researching your parents a little, you're not going to be sure if you're not this, because people who are hybrid are still going to have the trait. It's a dominant trait. Now, you could go and research, and that's kind of fun. If you've got your parents around, you can ask them to smile and see. And if one of your parents doesn't have dimples, then they're recessive, and they're going to be giving you the recessive gene. But the other parent must have dimples, and that's where you got your dominant. If they both have dimples, it's possible that they're both dominant for all, or maybe one's a hybrid as well, but they got the dominant gene there. So anyway, we'll do more of that later, but we'll add up, and then we did like a little tally when we were done. We did our just percentage of the class. Free ears, look at the picture. Let's say you have attached ears, not free, that's recessive. So if you have attached ears, you'd write attached, and I know you're going to be little e because that's a recessive trait. So you could not have a dominant gene there. So I know that's going to be the only answer. See how that goes? So the same for all of them. Go ahead and go through all your traits. And then there's 4 questions at the end that are now on Schoology that you can use these notes and your information and your kind of knowledge, and yeah, you should be able to answer. One thing you probably won't be able to answer unless I tell you right now, so I will. Some of these traits, when we did them in class, like let's say dimples, we had numbers like 5 out of 15 people having dimples, but dimples are dominant. So why doesn't everybody have dimples? Because, well, dimples are just kind of still a rare thing, and it doesn't mean it's ever going to become a dominant thing. It's just they're not that common. So yes, if you have one of each gene, you're going to have dimples. That's guaranteed, but not that many people seem to have them. So it's a rare gene to have, so it's going to be rare to pass on to your kids, and it's never going to change. So in the overall population, having dimples is still a rare-ish type of thing. Even though it's a dominant trait, it's still rare. So it doesn't matter if it's dominant or recessive. It's just how many people have it, right? So they'll pass it on, but there's not that many people to pass it on. So it's still going to stay rare. So there was a question like that in your questions below. So kind of answered that one for you. The rest of them I want you to try to figure out on your own and have fun doing this. And you can check with some of your parents' traits and see how they match up. It's kind of a cool activity to do as a group. All right. And hey, brothers and sisters. But anyway, thanks for joining and trying science. If you have questions, send me a message. But otherwise, I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye for now.